Hi guys, so welcome to another episode of The Distinguished Geek. So, last year Marvel had an identity crisis. This year it's all about the crime, romance and gunslingers. This is 1948. So even though Marvel had issues with creativity in 1947, Marvel was exploding with comics in the late 1940s. Now, as we know, a lot of the superhero and the funny animal comics started to disappear in the 1947. And so Marvel released a new genre of crime, romance and westerns, which were becoming ever so popular. Stan Lee also started to experiment with female superheroes aimed at girls. Now this was a gradual ever move that started in 1944 when America was fighting in World War II. Now some of these superheroes consisted of Sun Girl, the Sea Beauty Namora, and Venus. So in the late 1940s, Stan Lee was working with a large staff of artists, and they would all work together in one large room. And these included the famous Carl Burgos, John Buscema, Gene Colan, Dan DiCarlo, and Mike Skowalski. This room would become to be known as the bullpen. Now, a bullpen is an American baseball term where pitchers would practice, and so the artists adopted the name. But the name didn't really catch on and it didn't really last. It wasn't until 1960s that Stan Lee resurrected the name, but now the artists were working from home, and so the word bullpen referred to a community of editors, writers, artists and staff members that collaborated in producing Marvel Comics. So in the spring, Lawbreakers Always Lose issue number 1 was released. So by the late 1940s, crime comics became very popular, to the point that they were selling like hotcakes off newsstands everywhere. Now obviously Marvel condemned crime, but these comics would frequently make the criminals leading characters. And just to top it off, supposedly the stories were based on real life cases. So in March, the Two Gun Kid issue number 1 was released. Now this was Marvel's first Western comic, and the main character was called Clay Harder. Now Clay Harder was wrongly accused of murder, and he rode through the Old West using his skill as a gunslinger to fight fugitive and wrongdoers. And the twist was that he was a singing cowboy. With issue number 60 in November 1962, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created a new Two-Gun Kid, who looked more like a superhero than a cowboy. He would fight crime under a masked identity, and in normal life, he would be a lawyer going by the name of Matt Hawke. Now, the way Stan Lee transitioned the new Gun Kid was that he made the old Gun Kid, Clay Harder, to be a fictional novel character within the series. Also in the August, Kid Colt, Hero of the West issue number 1 was released. Now in this comic, set in the 19th century, the story was that an Old West rancher called Dan Colt was worried that his son Blaine was a coward. Now unknown to him, Blaine has self-taught himself to become an expert gunslinger. The problem was that he was worried because he knew he had a trigger finger when he had a temper, which didn't help because he had a short fuse. And he worried that he would do something that he would regret. Now this will be put to a test when Blaine's father, Dan Colt, was shot dead, and so Blaine confronted the killer and shot him dead in the street. He was now accused of murder, and just like the two-gun kid, he would ride the Old West, hoping to redeem himself, fighting criminals and most wanted. Kid Colt was the longest running Western comic book series ever. It lasted from 1948 to 1968. In 1969 it was revived, but most of the stories from 1966 onwards were reprints. After 31 years, Kid Colt came to an end in April 1979. It was revived in 2000 in a 4-part series of Blazing Glory and the one-off Mighty Marvel's Western Kid Colt and the Arizona Girl in September 2006. Also in August, Venus issue number 1 was released. Now in this first comic, Venus, the Roman goddess of love, left the homeworld of Venus, of course, to live amongst humans on Earth in the 20th century. She adopted the name of Victoria Starr and became a reporter at a beauty magazine. The comic started off as a humour comic, but eventually became a fantasy adventure series. Now, Venus being an Olympian goddess, she was frequently visited by other Olympian gods in the series, but she was also visited by a couple of Norse gods, Thor and Loki. Venus was revived in The Submariner in the 1970s as a mythological naiad claiming to be Venus of the 1940s. She later joined a new team called Agents of Atlas. And if you remember in last week's episode, Namora, the female submariner, had joined that same team. And finally, romance comics were becoming ever so popular with its readers, and so Marvel quickly moved into this genre, releasing My Romance issue number 1 in September 1948. So that's the serious part. This is the fun bit. So last week's question was, what breakthrough happened in this year? Nobody actually came up with the correct answer to this question. So the answer to it was the first time a plane had broken the sound barrier. So that's the clue with the speed. Right, so this week's question, and obviously it is just for fun, which pacifist campaigner was assassinated in this year? And once again, if you could just leave me the correct answer in the comments below, and I will feature the winner's name in next week's episode. No reviews on a film coming up so soon. I do have a few films in the pipeline to watch, but it's just trying to find time to watch them. On that note, by the way, if anybody has any films they wish for me to watch, any sort of iconic films that maybe people thought were crap and you think that they're really good, please mention them and I'll watch them. Chances are I probably have watched all the films that people have mentioned, because I am a film geek, geek in nature, but there may be some films out there that have slipped through the net that people thought were rubbish and have obviously gone viral because, you know, through word of mouth and become really popular, very much like The Shawshank Redemption, that it took 10 years for it to become very, very popular, and now it's probably one of the best films ever around, but completely flopped in the cinema. So if you've got a film you think that fits in that same category, please mention it, because I want to see those sort of films, and if you have any suggestions, please leave it down there, and I'll watch it, and then I'll leave you a review in, well, if we send it soon, it'll be next week's episode. Otherwise, it'll be in another episode down the line. Right, thanks guys for watching once again. Please, if you can just leave just a like, share and subscribe so you don't miss another episode. and I shall see you next week with year 1949. Lovely. Thanks, guys. See you soon. See you next week. Bye bye.
The end.